Here on Translucent, we were the first to notice coinciding dates between the takedown of the Aryan family out of Seattle, the release of Emma and Mr. Proper, and the release of Kara and her best friend, Corey. We also looked at Maddie's first cousin, Zach Cheeley, whom passed away a couple of years before. We explored Kaylee in great detail. We believe she never really resided full-time in Moscow. Before moving temporarily into 1122, she appeared to be registered at an apartment in Coeur d'Alene. We looked at Steve, the only parent whom has continuously pushed false narratives. Brian followed Maddie on Instagram. Brian touched their Wi-Fi network. We also analyzed Steve's behavior and statements, from being so relieved when Brian was arrested, relieved that it wasn't Steve that would be sitting in Lada jail. We listened to how Kaylee was reluctant to go back to Moscow. This story changed too. Kaylee was planning to go back to Moscow because she had finals. We heard how Steve was watching football, like every other American does on Sundays. And of course, this would also change. Now Christy revealed that Steve was in fact at emergency care, and this was rare, since Steve was never ever sick. We touched on Steve's vacations, 2 or 3 expensive trips per year. Photos on social media appeared to suggest Steve went alone with Kaylee and Maddie. The photos of younger Maddie, sexual in nature. We learned that Kaylee had a keen interest in human trafficking. And of course, with all the previous red flags, our minds wondered, were those trips to Central America part of some selection process of young girls whom would be sent north to work in prostitution? Yes. Our minds explored every avenue. Once Steve showed guilty knowledge through interviews, we became suspicious. Even the smallest clue would have our minds racing. Steve would wear a hex hat. We looked at the hex charts and again found coincidences. After the hex coin crashed in 2022, things would go wrong for Steve. So we spoke to Emma Bailey. She told us she heard Steve owed $700,000 to Jesse James Bailey. Jesse had already warned Steve a few months before by ending Steve's father. Now, Kaylee's organs would be used to pay back the debt if Steve failed to pay up. In fact, Steve himself revealed that Kaylee had a break-in at her apartment in Coeur d'Alene. Steve would go on to explain that he had told Kaylee to jump out of the window. However, Kaylee was frozen scared, hiding under the bed. Bizarrely, Steve would go on to explain this break-in was a prank. Yes, Steve has said the most bizarre things to the media. How could a break-in ever be a prank? What if Kaylee had shot the prankster in self-defense? Nothing with Steve's tales makes sense. So we wondered, was this break-in a warning by Jesse?
It was a while ago. I don't know. We did have a cartel episode.
Translucent. We did an episode.
The real Miami Vice.
That was.
Oh, yeah.
Miami Vice.
What was our cartel episode?
We did an episode on a cartel that involved a shooting of a poor single female in Gilbert, and then it rolled into this giant cartel. 100% on that one, where that spider web or that fishing net, if you will, got so big, we had to just stop and hand that off to a different agency and focus back on our homicide because we just had so many suspects of different crimes. But yes, that is actually more common than most people realize. People who commit a lot of crimes, and it's